There's a bill coming out of your Social Security check right now, every single month, that you might not have to pay at all. And I don't mean a discount. I don't mean 10% knocked off. I mean the whole thing. Gone. Paid by somebody else. Off your plate entirely. I'd bet money that most of you watching this right now have never once been told the phone number that actually makes that happen for you. Let me back up and give you the number that matters. In 2026, the standard Medicare Part B premium went up to $202.90 a month. Do the math on that, and you're looking at over $2,400 a year, and it comes straight out of your check before you ever lay eyes on it, every month. It's just the price of getting older, and there's nothing to be done about it. Here's the part that gets under my skin a little. There's a program run by your own state that will pay that premium for you if your income falls under a certain line. And that line sits higher than most people would ever guess. But nobody calls you up to tell you. No letter shows up in your mailbox saying, "Good news, you qualify." The whole thing just sits there and waits for you to stumble onto it yourself. Most people never do. They pay for years, sometimes for the rest of their lives, when they never had to pay a dime. Now, before you wave your hand and decide this isn't about you, give me one more minute. I've heard both sides of this 100 times. Some of you are already thinking, "I've got a decent pension, I'm doing okay." This kind of help is for folks who are really struggling. It's not me. I'm going to show you exactly why that particular assumption costs people money quietly, year after year. And then there's the other camp, the folks thinking, "I'm barely scraping by on my Social Security check. There's no way I qualify for anything. That's for people who know how to work the system." You're wrong too, and I say that with all the kindness in the world. Just stay with me. At least one of the 4 things I'm about to walk you through applies to you. And if you're anything like most retirees I talk to, 2 or 3 of them probably apply to you all at the same time. Quick, honest note before we get rolling. This is general education, not personal financial or legal advice. The rules on these programs, the income limits, the exact dollar figures, they shift a little from one year to the next, and they're different depending on which state you live in. So always double-check your own situation with the offices I'm going to name before you go making any decisions. Welcome to Retire Mentor, the channel where we sit down and untangle the confusing, honestly, kind of maddening rules that shape retirement here in America. If this video helps you out today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, because the people whose actual job it is to explain this stuff almost never do. I will, every week, for as long as this channel is running. Meet Robert. Let me tell you about a guy named Robert. Robert's 68, retired now, but he spent 31 years on the line at a plant just outside Flint, Michigan. Robert's the kind of man who fixed his own truck for 40 years. Never once called a plumber for a dripping faucet in his life. Still gets out there and mows his own lawn every Saturday morning, rain or shine, doesn't matter. He worked hard his whole life, saved what he could. And these days he gets by on his Social Security, plus a modest pension from the plant where he spent most of his adult years. Now, Robert does not see himself as a man who needs help from anybody. If you asked him, he'd tell you flat out, "I'd put in 31 years. I don't need anybody doing me favors. I can pay my own bills. Thanks." And that pride. That stubborn, hard-working pride. The very same pride that carried him through 3 decades on a factory floor without a single complaint is exactly the thing that kept him quietly paying his full Medicare premium month after month. He never once picked up the phone to ask one simple question that could have changed everything. Keep Robert in the back of your mind as we go through this, because by the end I'm going to show you exactly what changed for him. And if you actually follow along with what I lay out here, your own numbers might change too. This week even, I want you to stick around all the way to the end, because the 3rd thing on this list is the one almost nobody's ever heard of in their entire life. And for a lot of you, it might genuinely be worth more than all the rest of it put together. If you've retired recently, or your income dropped for any reason in the last year or 2, lean in when we get to that part. It's got your name on it. Number 1, the premium itself. Let's start with the piece carrying the biggest, most immediate dollar amount, and that's the Part B premium we already talked about. $202.90 a month in 2026, no exceptions for most folks. And most people just treat that number like it's carved in stone, the same way you'd shrug and pay a property tax bill that lands in your mailbox every year. What are you going to do, right? That there's a program most seniors have honestly never heard the name of. It's called a Medicare Savings Program. It's depending on which version you land in, your state doesn't just trim that premium a little around the edges. It pays the whole thing, all of it. Every month, for as long as you keep qualifying, not a reduced rate. gone. And here's exactly where people talk themselves right out of it before they ever check. Folks hear the word savings program, and they immediately picture somebody in far worse shape than they're in, so they never bother to call.
Ow.
But the income limits are a good bit higher than most people assume. And the only real way to know for sure is to let somebody actually run your specific numbers, not you sitting at your kitchen table at 11 o'clock at night doing guesswork in your head. Somebody who does this for a living? This one helps folks whose income leans mostly on Social Security the most. Because for you, having that premium just vanish can feel like the biggest raise you'll see all year. And it doesn't come from a cost of living adjustment. It doesn't take an act of Congress. It doesn't take some special connection or somebody pulling strings for you behind the scenes. It comes from one phone call to your local state health insurance assistance program, which everybody just calls SHIP for short. Costs you nothing. Takes maybe 15 minutes out of your afternoon. And it's staffed by trained people whose entire job, their whole reason for showing up to work, is walking seniors just like you through this exact thing. Number 2, your prescription costs tied right to that first one is something people never think to ask about in the same breath. And that's your prescription drug costs under Medicare Part D. There's a companion program called Extra Help. Some folks call it the low-income subsidy, depending on who you're talking to. And it does for your prescription premiums and copays roughly what the Medicare Savings Program does for your Part B bill. It knocks your drug costs way down, sometimes down to just a few dollars a prescription, instead of you paying full retail every single month like you've been doing. And here's something genuinely handy to know before you make the call. In a lot of cases, if you already qualify for that Medicare Savings Program we just covered, you get pulled into Extra Help automatically. No second application. No separate stack of forms to fill out. That one phone call to SHIP can end up fixing 2 totally separate bills for you at the same time, in the same 15-minute conversation. That's the kind of thing that makes you a little annoyed nobody told you sooner. This one helps anybody who's taking regular prescriptions the most. If you're on blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, or anything else you refill month after month, this is right where the savings start piling up. Month after month, year after year, it adds up a whole lot faster than you'd ever think it would. Number 3. The form almost nobody knows about, all right. Here's the one I told you to wait for. And I mean it when I say this trips up more people than anything else on this whole list, including folks who consider themselves pretty sharp about their own money. It's called the SSA 44 form, and it exists to fix a genuinely strange quirk in how Medicare figures out what you owe. Here's the problem it solves, and stay with me because this one's a little sneaky. Medicare doesn't look at your income from this year to decide what you pay this year. It reaches back and looks at your tax return from 2 full years ago. So picture this. If your income happened to be higher 2 years back, maybe you were still working, maybe your spouse was still working too, maybe you sold something one time that bumped your income up for that 1 year, well, Medicare can turn around and charge you a higher premium today because of it. They've got an official name for the extra charge. They call it an income-related monthly adjustment. And you can be sitting there paying it even though your actual income right now has already dropped way down since then. That's exactly what Robert ran into. Retired last year. His household income more than got cut in half almost overnight. But this year's Medicare premium was still being figured off his old working income from 2 years back, from before he'd ever stopped punching the clock. And most people in his spot just pay the higher number. They assume there's nothing to be done because nobody ever bothered to mention there's a whole form built for exactly this. The SSA 44 lets you go to Social Security and tell them, in plain language, look, my income changed because of a specific life event. Retirement counts. So do reduced work hours. So does the death of a spouse. So does losing pension income. They'll recalculate your premium based on your current lower income instead of making you sit and wait 2 whole years for the numbers to catch up on their own. This one helps anybody who's recently retired, anybody who's lost a spouse, anybody whose income has dropped for pretty much any legitimate reason. And for some folks, filing this one simple form brings their premium down by hundreds of dollars a month, starting almost right away, not 2 years down the road. Now, number 4. Your state might have its own program. In the 4th piece, this one's smaller in the grand scheme of things, but it's worth grabbing while you've already got the phone in your hand. It's called a State Pharmaceutical Assistance Program. Now, whether one even exists and how generous it is depends entirely on which state you live in. Some states run their own drug assistance program stacked right on top of the federal Extra Help program. They're built specifically to catch people who fall just above the federal income cutoff, but are still getting hammered by high prescription costs every month. A lot of seniors have never even heard the name of the program in their own state. Mostly because it never gets advertised anywhere, except some government website nobody thinks to go visit. This one helps folks whose drug costs run high, but whose income sits just a touch too high to qualify for the full version of extra help. Those are the people who fall right into that uncomfortable little gap between the two programs. The way you find out is the same phone call to ship you're already making. You just have to ask about it by name, because they won't always bring it up on their own, unless you're the one who mentions it first. Hash, but what if I call and don't qualify? Now, before we tally all this up, let me answer a question I know some of you are already chewing on. What if I make the call, and it turns out I don't qualify for any of it? Here's the honest truth, and it matters. There's zero downside to checking. The call is free, it's confidential, and nothing about asking these questions puts your current benefits at risk. Nobody flags your file. Nobody cuts what you're already getting. Nobody comes knocking on your door. There's no penalty for calling and simply not qualifying that year. And here's the kicker. The income limits shift a little every year. So even if you checked once a few years back and got turned down flat, it's worth checking again today, because that line may have moved in your favor, and nobody on this earth would have called to tell you. Let's add it all up. Let me step back and put these numbers side by side because it hits different once you actually see the pile. The Medicare Savings Program, if you land in the full version, can wipe out that entire $2,400 a year in Part B premiums. Completely. Every year going forward. Extra help can shave hundreds more off your prescription costs. Sometimes pushing close to a full $1,000 a year, depending on what you're taking. The SSA 44 form, for somebody whose income just dropped, can mean an immediate cut of hundreds of dollars a month, not spread thin over 2 long years, but starting almost right away, a month or 2 after you file. And the state pharmaceutical program, in states that have one, can tack on another few $100s a year on top of all of it. Put all that together, and for the right person in the right situation, we're talking about several $1,000s a year, every year, going forward indefinitely. That's not a one-time check that shows up and then disappears. That's a permanent change in how much money actually stays in your account every single month from here on out. What happened to Robert? Let's go back to Robert. When we finally sat down and walked through his whole situation, line by line, here's what we turned up. He was paying the full Medicare Part B premium out of his own pocket every month. And he had never once heard the phrase Medicare Savings Program spoken out loud in his life. Wasn't an extra help either. Even though he was refilling 3 separate prescriptions every month for his blood pressure and his cholesterol. And because Medicare was still calculating his premium off his income from 2 years back, from when he was working full-time on the line every day, he was basically being charged like he still had that paycheck rolling in. Even though he'd been fully retired for over a year at that point, 3 separate problems, all quietly costing him money at the same exact time. And every single one of them was something he had a full, unquestionable right to fix, no strings attached. Here's what changed. We made one phone call to his local SHIP office, and inside that same 15-minute call, he got screened for both the Medicare Savings Program and extra help side by side. Then, separately, we filed his SSA 44 form with Social Security. We laid it out plainly that his income had dropped because he retired. And we asked them to recalculate his premium off his actual current income, instead of his old working number from 2 years ago. Robert's day-to-day's life didn't change one bit. He didn't take on any risk. He didn't sign up for anything complicated. He didn't have to prove anything beyond the plain truth of where he stood right now. The only thing that changed was how much of his own Social Security check actually stayed in his account at the end of the month. And I want you to sit with this part because it matters more than it might seem. He wasn't taking a handout. He wasn't gaming anything or bending a single rule. He was just finally claiming money that had been legally his the whole time. Money the system had been quietly hanging on to for one reason and one reason only, because nobody had ever bothered to explain the rules to him. Here's exactly what to do this week. So here's what I want you to go do this week, and I promise you, not one piece of it costs you $1. Grab a pen. Pause the video if you need to. Write down these 3 things. First, Call your local state health insurance assistance program and ask them, plainly, to screen you for both a Medicare savings program and extra help at the same time. One call very often covers both. Second, if your income has dropped at all in the last year or two for any reason, whether you're retired, your hours got cut, if your spouse passed away, or you lost pension income you'd been counting on, ask specifically by name about filing the SSA-44 form with Social Security to get your premium recalculated on your current income instead of your income from 2 years back. Third, while you've already got SHIP on the line, ask them straight out whether your state runs its own pharmaceutical assistance program and whether you might qualify. That's it. 3 simple calls, 1 short form, and every piece of it is free from start to finish. And if the thing that's been holding you back this whole time is that you figure you can't afford to pay somebody to help, you sort through all this, let me be crystal clear. You don't have to pay anybody a cent. The SHIP counselors are free. They're funded specifically to help people in exactly your position. They'll walk you through every question you've got without ever charging you or trying to sell you a single thing. That's all it takes. A small handful of phone calls standing between you and real money that's been legally yours this whole time, sitting there unclaimed because the system was simply never built to walk over and tell you about it. If this opened your eyes even a little today, do me one small favor and hit that subscribe button, because I put out videos just like this one every week. I do it because the people who are supposed to explain this stuff to you almost never do, and somebody has to. Share this with someone you know who's over 65, especially somebody who's already convinced there's nothing left out there for them. There's a good chance they're wrong too. The same way Robert was wrong for over a year and never knew it. On down in the comments, I actually want to hear from you. Tell me which of these 4 things you had no idea existed before today. And if you've already been through this process yourself, tell everybody else watching what happened when you made that call, because your story might be the exact thing that finally gets somebody else to pick up their own phone this week. I read every comment that comes in, and whichever one surprises the most people becomes next week's video right here on this channel. One last honest reminder before you go. Everything in this video is general education, not personal, financial, or legal advice for your specific situation. The program details, the income limits, the dollar figures, they can shift depending on your state, and they change from year to year. So always confirm your own situation directly with your local state health insurance assistance program or the Social Security Administration before you make any final decisions.